Hello, and welcome to this special Gestalt IT Roundtable brought to you by our friends at Fortinet. We're here to talk about all of the interesting things happening in the world of networking and security and cloud, especially as those things converge together to offer a unique and different experience for the users that consume our services. I'd like to start off this roundtable by having our guests introduce themselves so you understand a little bit more about who they are before we move into today's topic discussion, starting with Dominik.
Hey, my name is Dominik, at Network Autobahn on the Twitter, and yeah, coming in from Berlin, Germany here.
All right, Dominik, thank you. Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben Story, and I'm be found on the Twitters as NTWRK80. Happy to be here.
All right, and joining us from the Fortinet side, Nirav?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Nirav Shah, Vice President for Products and Solution at Fortinet. And yes, looking forward to this chat.
Thank you for joining us, Nirav. And lastly, Peter.
Hello, I'm Peter Newton, Senior Director of Products and Solutions here at Fortinet, and looking forward to talking about the convergence of all things security and networking.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. Let's jump into the topic of this roundtable because I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on this. As we mentioned at the top, convergence is something that's happened quite a bit over the course of technology that we've been involved in. If you're old enough, you may remember the convergence of things like phones becoming voice over IP endpoints and all of the interesting stuff that came along with that. Or maybe you might have convergence from a different perspective, such as fiber channel over Ethernet, when we moved a lot of the storage traffic onto the network. But these were applications that became more network centric as opposed to what might happen when other infrastructure pieces become centralized in the network. And of course, one of the biggest ones there is security. You know, we work a lot in our normal organizations with networking teams and with security teams. Currently, those two teams are siloed together. But in the brave new world of the cloud, a lot of times those two entities must work in concert with each other in order to be able to enable our services to be used by our end user customers. So the question there becomes, these two teams have historically not been very integrated. How do you see networking and security converging as we move forward in a world where most of our data is no longer located in the on-premises data center, but instead is residing somewhere possibly in a public cloud environment?
Yeah, I would say the challenge these days are that we have more networking than ever before. So in the old days, we had a defined environment, we have local LANs that we controlled. At these days, the challenge is users can be in the office, they can be at home, they can be traveling, they can have maybe pop-up offices and all sorts of things. And the problem is kind of, you want to have them secure and you want that their network quality is kind of good. Yeah. So, and the challenge is to bring that all together. Yeah. And I think it's hard to achieve if you have a lot of siloed solutions. If you have different teams managing different things, that had even in the past was problematic, but I think these days it's really a hassle to manage connectivity in that style and also secure it that style. Yeah.
So Dominik, I have a question for you there. Is the difficulty in the way that the connectivity is being provisioned and managed, does that come from the fact that a lot of our assets are being located outside of our organization? And it's a connectivity problem from, say, the enterprise campus to the cloud? Or is it the trend of distributing our users and our knowledge workers out in a remote office type of situation thanks to work from home, where now instead of having one or maybe two or three enterprise campuses, I have 100 because that's where my users are?
I think in these days, you need to be prepared for all these scenarios, yeah? And you need to manage all these scenarios, yeah? So it's no longer one big choke point where you route all traffic through and do your security. Your security needs to be everywhere and needs to cover all these possible scenarios, yeah? And it's kind of challenging. Some people have maybe a poor connection at home and some others have good connection, and you need to monitor this as well. So monitoring, securing, and delivering that quality in a consistent way to all your users. That is kind of the challenge, yeah, with smaller teams, yeah. So in times of more distribution, the teams have not grown; they have become even smaller because a lot of people are now doing cloud work and so on. So I think it's this diversity that we have these days, yeah, that is challenging, yeah.
I think that's probably fair. Nirav, what do you have to say about that?
I absolutely agree the way Dominik explained how the users are everywhere and applications are everywhere. I think one of the most important thing is the most of the time when you see this network edges going from branch campus to work from anywhere, most of the customers are using the point networking product. And because they lack security, because they lack awareness, it is absolutely critical to bring security and networking together. Now, the difference here is though, there's a lot of buzz about converging, but converging only in certain places. I think to Dominik's point, I agree that it needs to be consistent, whether you're at office, whether it's in a cloud workload, or whether you're working at the coffee shop. You need to make sure that the security and networking convergence is consistent, but at the same time, it delivers better user experience. And it is hard to do. But if you could achieve those things together, this is when they are getting to the next phase of network modernization.
So, Nirav, the question that I have for you regarding this consistency across these platforms is the consistency for the user experience so that our users are getting the same kind of service no matter where they might happen to be. Like you said, maybe it's the coffee shop, maybe it's the home office. Or is the consistency something that we would like to see from the infrastructure side, from the service side, where by having a consistent infrastructure and consistent pieces to it, it's easier to craft policy in order to ensure that our users are safe and secure and able to connect no matter where they might happen to be?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. And Tom, that's a really important question because right now in the industry, there is sometimes misconception. Some vendors will say, oh, if you do convergence at one part of the infrastructure in cloud, you're done. That's not the case. As you rightly said, the users, and if we can make sure that across the infrastructure, if we are providing that convergence and there is a single piece of management to have that policy going across, we are making sure that this increasing cyber attacks, which can be coming from any part of the network, we are preventing. So having that part of the consistent security, we are giving better security posture, but because it has a modern networking technology built in, it also delivers that user experience.
I think one of the key words that I keep hearing is consistent, consistent, consistent. And that's part of the problem that we've had traditionally is, the networking people chose, one stack, whether that be, blue or green or whatever color switch and router, et cetera, that they wanted to put in. And then the security team had a different approach. They picked the best solution for each part. So they didn't necessarily need them, at least at first, to work together. It was the email security, it was the antivirus, it was the next generation antivirus, whatever the new buzzword was for that particular area. And I think trying to get consistency now, people are wanting to pick a platform versus picking a bunch of solutions and trying to cobble them together. I remember one vendor showing us a picture of a airplane made out of about 15 different airplanes versus an airplane that was just a Boeing 787. And I think that's part of what we're trying to get to with this consistency and security and networking.
So Ben, I'd like to add on to that because this is something that I've seen quite frequently in the security space, and I kind of want to get the take of the folks from Fortinet, because in the networking space, you tend to pick a vendor and you go with them because they make the equipment that you need. It's pretty much a cut and dried thing. You have switches, you have routers, you have access points, what have you. But in the security space, there are so many point specific tools that are created to solve a specific issue, like data loss prevention or IDS IPS, or literally name any one of a number of tools, that it's difficult to integrate those into a platform because you're either dealing with a small startup who's pioneered the technology, or you're dealing with a larger organization that's trying to roll that type of solution into their framework, into their platform. And in some cases they do it well, in some cases they don't, which leads to this kind of best of breed mentality, which is I'm going to buy whatever the best happens to be because it may be that only 2 people in the world make that. So I'm kind of curious to hear the thoughts of Peter and Nirav. How do you guys approach this when people are like, well, we need this, but we don't want it from this specific vendor, or, worse yet, we don't want it from you. We want you to play nicely with these other people.
Well, I think when we talk about a platform, and Ben mentioned this idea of products that work together, the Fortinet's view is they don't necessarily need to be all from the same vendor. A platform can be a multi-vendor platform. We have our Fortinet security fabric, where there are a lot of different Fortinet products that are in there, but we have more than 400 integrations to other companies and other company products, so that you can absolutely have a multi-vendor solution where, even if you have a particular technology that Fortinet does offer, that the customer can select from a variety of competitors that are also integrated into this platform. And to me, that really demonstrates Fortinet's commitment to making a platform work for our customers, because it really enables them, it puts them in the driver's seat as to who they want to put into their platform. And hopefully they see the value in selecting Fortinet as being a very open platform with lots of options to choose from.
Just in response to that, I think in the past, we had often the challenge, sometimes we had even the budget to onboard new security features. I'm just making here an example. You want to have a sandbox feature, but if it is really hard to integrate that and it's costing a lot of engineering hours, it was hard to get there, yeah? And I see with this platform approach, either it is internal or with a good implemented third-party solution, that you can just flip these features on. It's a bit like what was also compelling in the cloud. If the features can be easily turned on and you have actually protection right after turning on that feature, it is compelling. It is something that actually protects your users in a meaningful time. Yeah.
I do agree, because one of the most important part about the platform is integration, right? And the reason the Fortinet's approach is resonating is because this is not a few acquired companies and stitch them together. This is an organic innovation which is started from a network firewall, which is a foundation. And from there, we can expand to the endpoint, we can expand to cloud, can expand to all different workloads, and then make sure, as Peter said rightly, also over 450 other vendors that we can integrate. So now with that kind of cybersecurity platform approach, you're getting the best of breed integration, which is key. Because today what we are seeing is, as attackers are more and more becoming advanced, it's not about solving the security in a point product. It's about making sure across the attack chain, you are secure. And you can do that when you're using the platform approach end to end.
And I might argue that is a very important piece, because we see a lot of solutions that are specifically targeted. Look at your latest list of CVE exploit descriptions, and you'll see that they're going after very specific pieces inside of those. And so possibly one of the things that a company might feel is that they need to switch their solution to something that doesn't use that platform, or something that doesn't have that type of exposure. Do you see a lot of companies that have these kinds of restrictions in place, that effectively their security architecture is dictated by policy because it says we can never use this product, or we must always use this solution? And do you feel like having an open platform like the one at Fortinet gives you a flexibility to kind of work with those companies, whereas other solutions, they may have to step away and say, well, we really can't help you if that's a restriction, because we must use this module in our firewall to do so many other things?
I think absolutely it matters, because one of the things that we are seeing more and more is everybody can talk about security, everybody can talk about providing and protecting, but the point is how well it is coordinated. And the reason I think I'm seeing more and more customers are becoming aware is how well your threat intelligence is built in, right? At Fortinet, one part of coordination is achieved with the scale and how quickly we can address those attacks. To give you a perspective, we have over 5 million plus devices, which we call it sensors, sitting worldwide. And we consume from that 100 billion plus events a day. What that means is over 1 billion plus updates we are putting back to the entire platform to make sure across the platform we are securing. And that's what customers are looking for. It's not about just getting that policy on a one-point product and securing, But how do we make sure it is, again, going back to that end-to-end consistent coordinated security to prevent known and unknown threats?
So let me ask this question, because I know that this is something that comes up quite frequently in these kinds of discussions, is that there's a lot of solutions out there that will solve these problems. And we talked about the importance of converging them together in these kinds of scenarios. But one of the things that I need for myself is the ability to manage these solutions as a unit. I know that we hear the term single pane of glass used quite frequently, almost like a punchline at this point. But reality is, for a lot of us on the operations side, we don't have that unified single pane of glass. I have 5 or 6 browser windows that could be up at any one time running and trying to help me manage the individual pieces, because while they work well, they don't work well together. And there's no way for me to just click a couple of buttons and push policy to those different devices. What's the take that you have on the open platform and ability to manage it as one specific unit? Do you see that that's something that companies want to participate in, or do you see it more as a nice to have, but not anytime soon?
We certainly see the need for that common management platform, and we've actually been opening up our abilities to manage multiple vendors within our security fabric. One of the one of the things that drives convergence frequently is this operational efficiency that comes from having multiple different features and capabilities driven off the same platform or off the same product. I mean, if you look over the years of security, we've seen more and more features and capabilities become part of the firewall appliance, as it morphed and took on more and more capabilities. You can see the same thing happening within the platform, so that within the platform, you've got a common management view, and you see more and more features are being brought into the platform. Today, I don't think we've got everything in the platform, and so you actually see companies that will be adopting a few platforms that they might have implemented in their operations. But it's definitely the long-term direction is that single complete integration.
One thing that I also see is the customers may not go and use the entire platform, but what they want to see is that has the right principles built in. For example, zero trust as a mindset. They want to see that can this platform help them expanding to the zero trust mindset, so that they piece by piece, they can put that explicit access across the network. And those are key. It's about having those architectures foundation built in, rather than they going and doing the entire platform day one. It's going to be a journey, and Fortinet is a vendor to help them on that journey, achieving those principles.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, most of the problems tickets that are coming in and so on are from an end user perspective. They don't care if this is a networking or a security issue. And then we have in the past with NOC and SOC sometimes ticket ping pong, and the user is sitting there and is still having the same problem. I think it makes sense if the management is somehow unified, the logs are unified, so that this becomes more an end-to-end game. Like most of the problems are an end-to-end problem, so that this is holistically viewed. So we need to tear down this metal doors and bring the teams together to, let's more or less say, solve problems faster. Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you guys see, you said that the platforms, there's, a lot of companies are still using multiple platforms as things are, converging. Do you see the industry starting to have frenemies talking to each other more, where they realize they're not going to get the whole pie, but if they talk together and work together, there's better synergy for their customers?
I wouldn't say that we're starting to see it. I would say that we've been living it for years. If you look at, as I mentioned, we have our platform where we have integrations with many other companies. Well, we actually compete with many of these companies in various areas of our business. So we're doing it because we recognize that our customer base, some of them want to use that product. So, or maybe they have that product deployed. They're not in a position they can rip it out. And we want to ensure that they have the complete security as they roll out their instance. So we will partner and have partnered for years with companies that we're actually competitors with. And I see that as an ongoing trend as the multi-vendor environment is not going away. And that's why a platform is not a single vendor's offering, but really it's an ecosystem.
A question that I have regarding that, because the term zero trust came up, and this is something that I've seen a lot kind of in the security space, but also in the networking space, that this is the next big thing that's supposed to be preventing attacks, halting ransomware before it can infect major systems. But I also see that a lot of companies have a very different approach to the way that they do zero trust. Maybe it's more host based, maybe it's more networking based. The question that I have, maybe for the panel here, how can you adopt multiple versions of this idea? Is there a way to kind of integrate different aspects of zero trust into what you do to provide additional in-depth defense in depth? Or is there one solution that works better than others that you feel like the industry should be adopting as they try to converge networking and security together in this model?
Just a quick take on that. I think security works best if we have multiple compensating layers over each other. I really like the approach to work with partner vendors. Even if you have the best feed in the world, sometimes it helps to have a compensating technology that is doing something maybe a bit in a different style from a different angle, and combine those together. Yeah, so that is the strongest foundation. And I think was a problem in the past in the, let's say, general sec, infosec industry, that the vendors have not well played together. And actually the ATP crews, the bad guys, this is what they leverage to gain access to multiple networks and so on. So I think it's moving in the right direction. We are still at the beginning of that journey, but yeah, so we need to do everything to defend ourselves, and yeah, that's the only way to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that, we've often talked about security and networking as being, defense in depth and needing layers. And I think that now, instead of, looking at it of, the perimeter and then the layer behind the perimeter and then, the next layer, every node, every network device, every firewall needs to be a sensor and needs to be part of that in depth, a different layer, so to speak, even though now we're not layering as much as we are just putting moats around everything. I mean, zero trust, that's the only way it's going to work. Is I don't think there's going to be a solution where just host-based zero trust or just network zero trust. As a reseller, we've been looking for that potential, panacea. It doesn't exist, and I don't think it ever will. So, we're kind of guiding customers down the path that you're going to need both.
I think one of the big confusions around zero trust is the way that the term has been applied to so many different point products that address different elements of the overall zero trust story. I mean, zero trust is in itself quite a broad philosophy, really. It's a mindset. And we hear vendors talk about their zero trust product B or zero trust product C, and it's in some sense confused the market as to what is zero trust about. We like to think of it, there's this whole mindset of zero trust, this philosophy that then can lead into architectures of how you implement those philosophies that can then be supported by initiatives and specific products or features that enable that zero trust natures, the ideas of, explicit verification before a user device accesses an asset, protecting and encrypting data at rest, ensuring segmentation of networks so that even if something should be breached, it's contained in both its span and breadth as well as the time period. So zero trust, a lot of vendors have been using it in a lot of different ways to describe their pieces and parts of the zero trust, but like an elephant, that, it might feel like a snake in one part, might feel like a trunk in another. Zero trust is a big thing. And I do believe it's the right step forward. And it's going to take multiple solutions to really deliver on that philosophy and architecture into any one organization.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think in the past, everybody wants to do that. The problem was how to deploy a consistent policy, how to be consistent that this zero trust philosophy that you maybe had in mind, that you laid out in theory, is really becoming in reality. Yeah, that was really hard. And if you have a centralized management, it's so much more easy to deliver that that promise of zero trust. Yeah.
And then it really goes to the point of when you're looking at the various elements of zero trust, there's the things that you need to put on your endpoint that of course will require central management. Then you're also, for example, zero trust network access. You want that to be universal. It's not a remote access solution only. It should exist no matter where users are. And for that, you need to have management tools that address cloud access, on-prem access. And so, yes, the platform that you select, going back to this convergence of networking and security, and to Nirav's point of selecting a platform that has that capability to enable zero trust across everywhere that you will operate and everywhere your users will be, is a critical part of that evaluation as to which platform you should be looking at and adopting.
So we've talked a lot about security solutions during this roundtable so far, and I come from a networking background, but I know that a lot of people are kind of pushing this idea that the network needs to effectively become a utility. It needs to be a common carrier for all of our data being headed to the cloud and deal with things that we need to build a security architecture on top of it. And I know that there are some people out there who are even starting to kind of go a little bit further and say maybe the network as we know it is dead, and that all it is just a pipeline that we build services on top of. What would you say to that? Do you feel like networking is kind of over the hill and kind of headed down, and that there are other things that we need to be focused on, or is there still a lot of value in the way that we build our networks even as we move out to the public cloud?
Tom, first of all, when I hear somebody says network is a dead, I understand that they don't understand what network means, and I acknowledge that's okay. But I feel in today's hyper-connected world, network is the most important part, right? Network is playing a core central role to make sure it is connecting users, branches, campus, data center to everything. And it is important that we make this network more modern. You make some architecture changes with the technologies like SD-WAN, using AI ops on top of it to make it simple and predictive failure, and then expand that to other cloud technologies. But all of this needs to come together and make sure that we are helping them to deploy securely. And that is what is missing. When people talk about network, they either talk about from just the legacy path where security is an afterthought, or they talk about network more from a lack of awareness. But when you bring network to the central discussion, has this new technologies built in, it's part of the platform approach, and has all the zero trust principle, then we are helping them, the CIOs and VP of infrastructure, to simplify operation and right there get much, much better utilization for their ultimate goal of getting digital acceleration.
I agree. I think if anything, the network is more important as we add security to it. For anybody who's ever tried to implement a point security product that needs to see the network traffic but isn't actually in line with the network traffic, they'll know the pain of multiple taps, spans, ER spans, et cetera, and how fast that adds up in price. I think network switches and access points as sensors, that's the key. I mean, the network is going to become the sort of distributed firewall, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, everything is going to be part of the firewall sending back data.
Yeah, and it's a very sad day in the cloud if there is no network. Yeah, so.
I mean, if we can get rid of the network, then none of us have anything to worry about, right? But I think maybe the more important point is that the network itself becomes an afterthought when convergence happens, because you have the ability to make a more intelligent network construct. You're not worried about whether or not this request needs to go to the SOC or to the NOC. It's a team that works together to make those kinds of things happen. And maybe, as we get close to wrapping up here, I can get your thoughts as we try to move toward this utopia where everybody kind of plays at the same level on the same team, working toward the same goal. What are some ways that our organizations can look to kind of ease this transition as we look at doing convergence to kind of help the process along? Because as we know, and we've seen over the years, when two teams are brought together, even for a common purpose, there tends to be a lot of friction, and we need to understand how to properly approach this discussion so that it happens quickly and we can be focused on providing services to our customers and not necessarily fighting turf wars?
I think, Tom, one of the things I've seen in enterprises in the last 5 to 10 years is it's not 2 teams that we're trying to integrate. It's 3. You've got the network team, you've got the security team, and then you've got what I call the paper security team that all need to integrate together. You've got the guys that are doing the operations, the network and security guys, and then you've got this other group that they've got the check boxes, they've got the compliance, they understand all the frameworks that have to be complied with, and all 3 need to work together, because a lot of times the guys doing the check boxes don't necessarily understand the operations and vice versa, and we need to.
Yeah, I just think I agree absolutely, Ben. And to your point, Tom, I mean, we have already started seeing the trend that security and networking teams are coming together. One of the classic example is secure SD-WAN as a solution. I mean, we started 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's every discussion, security and SD-WAN deployed together. And it's a number 1 requirement. And we started seeing how it is going now to work from anywhere solutions to the cloud, to the data center. So it's a journey, and networking and security teams are figuring out how to bring that, because ultimately they both want the best of the world, better user experience with better threat protection.
I would like to add that, we're seeing more and more that when we're engaging with customers, we're not just engaging with the networking team, or we're not just engaging with the security team. Really, we're seeing both sides of those organizations come together as they're evaluating solutions. I think that's an excellent indication that, historically, it would be just one team. But we are seeing more and more that we're seeing both sides of those come to the table. And I think it's due to the mutual respect that they have for each other, understanding that both are important for their organization to succeed.
It sounds like in order to make sure that we're prepared for a positive and productive future, that we need to consider a lot of the ways that our platform operates. We've spent a lot of time working in silos, and we've spent a lot of time with our teams not really sharing a lot of information and buying solutions that approach their problems specifically, but not the organization as a whole. And in order for this to work properly, what you really need to do is consider the needs of your users and consider the needs of your staff, but also understand how all of those pieces fit together and allow you to converge that talent in one place. Because the more operationally converged your infrastructure is, the more likely you are to see the significant gains that we've heard about in a lot of these cloud presentations. If you're still using discrete products in silos, I don't think you're going to realize the gains that you want to see. So it might be time to analyze exactly how you're implementing things, and maybe you need to look at investing in a platform that will allow you to tie all of these things together. And I know for a fact that our friends here at Fortinet do have a platform just like that, as they've mentioned on the podcast. So Nirav, if people want to learn a little bit more about that, where can they go to find more information?
Yes, the best place to go is Fortinet.com, and you will find 2 important discussions there. First is the cybersecurity platform, what we call Fortinet Security Fabric, and you will also see security-driven networking, which is that consistent convergence of networking and security. So do visit that and give us your feedback.
All right. I want to thank our guests for joining us, especially our friends from Fortinet who have helped bring this presentation to you. We will be back with more great roundtable discussions. If you'd like to learn more, you can always head over to gestaltit.com, or you can follow us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/gestaltitvideo. We look forward to having another great conversation with you in the near future.